Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. We had anticipated having a guest with us today, a Marine Second Lieutenant Matt Weiss, who's been on the news lately, has written a new book. He's a Gen Zer. His book is called, if you could put that up there, We Don't Want You, Uncle Sam. And he's talking about some of the problems with recruiting. Unfortunately, we have some sort of scheduling difficulty. He's actually overseas at the moment and has having some trouble making the connections. If he was able to come in, we'll bring him in to this show here. But in the meantime, we've got plenty of information. We've actually got some clips of him elsewhere, which we can bring in to show you some of the things he's talking about. And then we're going to talk about why is the U.S. Army having so much trouble recruiting. Now, there has been some major shortfalls in the Army, especially the largest of the four services in recruiting, like 15,000 shortfall this year. I think it's similar number last year. So it's a big red flag that has been causing some trouble. And I want to show you couple of clips of what Matt has had to say here. Here's one that he was on Fox News not too long ago.
But military leaders say there's been a shift.
We are challenged by the fact that a small number of young Americans, 23%, are qualified to serve. Fewer still, we're finding, are interested in serving. And that's something that we are working very hard to change.
People don't really know what the military is, who actually serves. It's not so prevalent anymore.
25-year-old Marine Matthew Weiss wants to be part of the military solution to recruiting Gen Z. He wrote a book called We Don't Want You, Uncle Sam.
Frankly, I saw on television a lot of admirals and generals diagnosing this complex recruiting crisis. But I thought in my head, I said, many of those amazing leaders, they were recruited 20, 30 years ago. They don't know what's on my little brother who's in high school's Instagram feed. They don't understand sort of some of the Gen Z specific perspectives. So I wanted to arm them with this perspective. I wanted to analyze my generation and give my generation a viewpoint on a few things, then explain to them, hey, how can we change or alter the military to do it better maybe?
Yeah, that's a good goal, to say, hey, you guys need to understand a little bit about what we're all about here. It's not just about, your grandma's or granddad's World War II generation, or even the Vietnam era, or even from my Desert Storm era. I mean, the reasons why I joined the service, and I actually, just for your knowledge and a little bit of background, I actually joined, first of all, as a private back in 1985, and I joined as an artillery branch. I was a multiple launch rocket systems crewman, went to Germany for a while, and then later got out and came back and got a commission and came back in as an officer, and ultimately retired as a lieutenant colonel in 2015. But I actually was part of that group that volunteered to serve just in the regular Army. I signed an initial tour of duty to serve the country in there, and it was mainly be out of a sense of patriotic duty. I felt that it was my obligation to the country. I was going to graduate college, and I was going to go on to serve. And at the time, I actually thought it was going to be as a coach and a teacher. It turned out to be something very different. Because once I actually served in the military, I'm like, oh no, I really do like this. But the reasons today are very different here. And I believe I see we have Matt has joined us here. So let me bring him in live. Matt, sorry we missed you at the beginning here, but good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Howdy. I'm coming to you live 10,000 miles away at a good 5:30 in the morning. Sometimes we have some network issues, so I apologize for jumping on late, but I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. Wow, I didn't realize it was quite that early in the morning there, but I'm even more grateful to have you on board here. We just showed one clip from you when you were on Fox not too long ago, talking about your book and talking about how this is not the same generation that some of these older guys joined up with. And I was in the process of saying how even my generation from prior to Desert Storm, I joined up as a private initially in the 1980s. And some of my reasons are different than they are today. So you've now written a book to talk about some of these differences. And if you could just real quickly, just tell us, why did you write this book and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Absolutely, sir. So I wrote the book. Thank you again for having me on. I wrote the book because I saw on the news this constant talk about the military recruiting crisis. We saw on all types of stations, left, right, whatever it was, a lot of admirals and generals, really senior, distinguished leaders, discuss what they thought the reasons were and what they could do. And I have great respect for my leaders in every single topic in military affairs, strategy, whatever, except for this topic. Because frankly, if you were recruited to join the military 20 or 30 years ago, you have no idea what the current generation is looking at on their Instagram, on their Facebook, on their actual phone, right? So I wanted to give the voice of Generation Z. I felt that, hey, the recruiting crisis is directly impacting us. We are the generation. We need a Gen Z type voice. So that was the impetus for writing the book. The book is 21 chapters, really 21 problems with 21 solutions that basically go and give an overview of things that we can change. They go from micro problems to sort of macro societal, and I try to give sort of a guidebook of how we can have these conversations and actually discuss things that we can do to make an impact on this problem.
Now, I'm just curious. I actually did quite a bit of writing when I was still on active duty, and it was pretty difficult in some ways, especially if it was something that maybe the senior leadership didn't want to talk about or so. And I'm just curious, as someone so young in the career as you are, how did you approach the Marine Corps to get them to buy off on doing this, and then all these media events that you're making?
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually I found the opposite, which is good, because the topic is so important and they're really looking for such key insight. They're pretty supportive of it, right? I'm not bashing the service in any way. I'm not writing an expose. I'm obviously an intel officer. There's no classified information in the book. My mother theoretically could have written the book. It's all public knowledge, I guess, but I condense it in a way that they're actually interested in. I spoke to a lot of senior commanders who actually helped give ideas, right? I really crowdsourced a lot of these ideas. I will not take credit for every single idea. I mean, they're my writing, but a lot of them are discussions with people and junior enlisted as well. What do we think is right? And they've been very supportive. The DoD reached out initially upon launch, had a great conference with a lot of DoD policymakers. All the Marine Corps senior leadership have great discussions with them. All branch senior leadership, really excited to have me on these podcasts to talk about this issue, because frankly, we all need to talk about this. The more conversations we can have to unearth the best possible ideas, the better we're going to be. And that, I think, is extremely, extremely important, to have this conversation. You may not disagree. You may disagree with half the things I wrote. That's fine. I'm very okay, very happy with that. I need us to have this conversation, though. We need to have these ideas discussed.
I agree. I mean, because there really is no single right answer. There's just a lot of these are the things that are, and especially when you're talking about someone giving them reason to join the service, there's 1,000 different reasons why people do. So you have to try to find the commonalities and make sure at least that you're doing the best you can to make it appealing to the most troops that you can at any given time. So I think in that regard, there's not like this is right and that is wrong. It's like what we're doing is not working, though, generally speaking. And what I want to do here is I want to show you bits of 3 separate recruiting commercials that we have right now. And then I'm going to ask you a couple of specific questions after each, and any opportunity that you have to say, hey, this is, chapter 7 of the book where I talk about this and explain how that's leading into it. Because I think what you're going to see here is 3 examples where we may be missing the mark a little bit. And I wonder if you could maybe say, all right, here's what maybe they could do, the recruiting, to improve on that for the next one. So, Gary, let's run that first one. That's the kind of the current, the be all you can be commercial.
Stand up!
Okay. Now, I'll just admit, let me just put this on the stage, both for you and for all of our viewers here who are watching this, is that I'm coming at this, maybe I'm one of these old dinosaurs that you're talking about, we need an update or whatever, but I'm also coming at it from somebody who's had 4 combat deployments. And when I look at some of these things, I'm thinking, okay, it's important to recruit people to find out where they are, but everybody needs to know tacitly and expressly, rather, that by joining up here, you may be having to go into combat here, and you may have to put your life on the line and potentially sacrifice it for your fellow troopers and for the country. And when I see stuff like this first one here, I'm thinking it looks more like adventure training, and there's a little happy piano music in the background, and there's a guy who's just smiling like he just made an adventure jump and he's so cool and his buddies are walking with him. Are we downplaying enough of the potential risk and hardships, and to try to make the pleasant stuff? Do we have that balance right?
Yeah, the one thing, so I'll say, and anyone that's shrunk before, you're not usually smiley and happy after you. Some people are vomiting and extremely nervous, and it's a
Right.
you got sweat on your face. Right? It's sort of a brutal process. So I think it's a good question, right? If you actually look at the recruiting crisis on many ways, I think one of the things we actually will be okay with. There's always going to be a cadre of Americans that wants to be the tough door kicker, frontline infantry guy or girl. And just we can talk about that. That's an interesting topic, the female male debate. But you're always going to have that cadre, right? That I'm not as worried about. I'm actually worried about a lot of the service side jobs, the jobs that could be, I could be supply at McDonald's or I could be supply in the Army, right? And that's where you're trying to recruit a lot on the margins, right? You're just trying to explain, hey, time in service is more meaningful, it's more beneficial. We need to convince people not to take the McDonald's job, but to actually come and do potentially a very similar job in the military. That's where you're losing a lot of people. Now, with directly though about sort of the intensity of the force and the actual combat level, I think Gen Z, one of the things, the way I'll respond to this, I talk about in chapter 2, differentiating through competition and just how you reach us. We are a competitive generation. We also understand, because of social media, when I post online, right, I know instantly I get feedback, how many likes I get, how many likes my friend gets. We're competing with each other socially, right? We understand that we thrive on competition. We're not all this happy, everyone gets a trophy generation like the millennials were, right? We want competition. I want to compete. If I'm jumping, I want to be able to say I hit the mark 10 times better than my friend who jumped, right behind me, right? So we like that competition. We like that grit. We also know when we're being marketed and sold to. Right, we're very good because everything's online. I always am getting sales pitches. I'm exposed to it. Kids were not marketed to back in not as much back in before social media.
Yeah.
Now I get product reviews all the time. I understand sales. Gen Z understands sales better than other generations. So we know when something is like, well, it doesn't really seem right. We know when it's not matching up. When I could see a TikTok of an Army guy jumping and the nice rosy video, right? So to be very truthful, I think, about what the time in service is.
So can Gen Z handle the truth?
And I think they have to. I think you actually have to. Not only can they, some people obviously in my generation are can't, and exclude them from even the concept of serving or the concept of potential. But those that are on the border that you're trying to convince, the larger group that you're trying to explain, you need to show what the truth is. You need to explain, yes, combat is a brutal thing. Right, you're going to have extremely difficult days, right? Like the one thing I'll give the Marine Corps credit when they show these really intense, rough training videos. Training is tough, mud on your face, crawling through the barbed wire, not easy, not fun. Like you're going to have that brutality, right? And you need to be open and honest with that. Of hey, there are some days that are going to be terrible. You're going to be for every one jump you get, you're going to be in class for 1,000 hours and packing your chute and learning that, right? But the more honest that we can be, I think you're actually reached. You'll be like, hey, listen, it's not going to be great. But the one time I do get to jump for all that reward, that could be an amazing experience.
Yeah, totally agree with that. All right, now we're going to show you another one here, the part of a commercial here where there's a different focus on it.
What does it mean when people say America is a land of opportunity?
It means we strive to be a nation of limitless possibilities.
Exploring those possibilities isn't just an inclination.
It's our greatest strength, the power to discover.
To redefine yourself.
To improve yourself.
To challenge yourself.
To challenge yourself.
To challenge yourself.
To realize there's more in you
than you ever knew
that you could do.
To be all you can be.
To be all you can be.
It means never assuming
something can't be done.
And if it's the right thing to do,
never stopping until you achieve it.
That's how the U.S. Army has succeeded since the founding of this country.
Since the founding of this country.
Giving people an open field to explore what they do best.
With the best tools.
The best training.
The best technology in the world.
The possibilities really are endless. And the world sees that.
It's what we fight for every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Seeing those possibilities, then going out and achieving them.
That's okay, we'll cut it off there. That continues on to run for a while. But you see there, this the focus is the first part is I want to challenge myself. And then you can see this one a little bit more does show some of the difficulties and more of the rigors of it than the previous one did. And then it also shows, like you can also be humanitarian aid, perhaps, because we certainly do a lot of that too. So how would you characterize this one in terms of, is this the right focus to say, I want to challenge myself? And there's also the underlying theme of diversity, because every one of those first 5 or 6 people were of different races and ethnicities and all that. Is that too much, or do you think this one's a little bit more on the mark, that it's going to appeal to the Gen Z folks?
Yeah, so it's a great question because the whole diversity question is something we don't want to avoid. Gen Z wants to talk about it, and we shouldn't be so afraid that, like, oh, if I say something wrong, like, we need to have these conversations. I'm happy you bring it up, right? And it's important. So yes, obviously I have a key diversity chapter. I believe it's chapter 7. No, it's chapter 19, right? America's unique tapestry, right? Look, diversity matters to Generation Z. There's no question, right? It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And we don't want to be ever seen as pandering to this group or that group, right? Again, the lack of authenticity in some of the commercials, that was, by the way, a probably better commercial. The Be All You Can Be campaign is strong overall. I think there's a lot of goodness to the campaign, so I don't want to just bash.
Yeah.
It's easy to bash when you're on the outside. I think what I will say, you don't want to pander to one group or the other, and that commercial doesn't do that. I think in the past, other commercials did, right? I think the Emma commercial you had in the beginning, that got a lot of flame for, right? It was sort of too overly selling to, like, you look different than me in this group or whatever, right? We all know in service, you're reliant on the person next to you for your life. You don't care who they are, where they came from, what their backstory is. Like, you want the best person possible, right? But I think Gen Z does want to know, as the demographics of the U.S. change, frankly, right, that yes, the military is a welcoming place for all different races, for all different genders. We do have a big problem.
So let me ask you this. So I can tell you from my own experience, along the point you just made there, obviously, I mean, America is a multi-ethnic country. I mean, across the board, it's self-evident and it's obvious. So when we're in a unit, and especially when I was in some combat units, we're focused on creating a unity and a teamwork within the troop / company, up at the brigade, battalion, and then an entire regiment in some of the cases where I was in the armored units. That's all we're focused on. No one ever said, all right, let's make sure we have enough of this ethnicity and this diversity and this other whatever category. No one cared anything about that. If there was if one company had like 40% black and another one had like 12% black and another one Hispanic, no one cared anything. No, we didn't even pay attention to that, because what we did care a great deal about was how good that guy is at his job and how good they are at performing their tasks so that our left and right flanks are covered. And so when I look at this video here and I see that they're making a big effort to put all the different ethnicities in the commercial at the same time, is that something that the Gen Z actually cares about, that they would say, okay, cool, I'm glad they put that in there? Or do they even notice that as well?
So the big data and polling will show Gen Z is more socially conscious. They do care that all groups in America are represented. So they're on the mark with that. I think the larger messaging, what people that are interested in the military are afraid of in many ways, and that's sort of missing the mark in the larger societal, is this overemphasis that because my skin color is this or yours is that, or my religion is this and yours is that. It's such an emphasis. And one of the beautiful things about the military, as you just said, is it's one of the few places in society where none of that matters. We have people from all over, like I said, every single possible background. My Marines that I lead here, every single possible background that there can be, and we are all truly united as a team, right? At boot camp, at OCS, we were all equal because we were all lower than dirt, right? In boot camp,
right.
we were all equally yelled at. You were all pushed into the ground, equal level, right? It didn't matter where you were from, right? Good training experience, and that's the point, that the military, once you're in, doesn't matter, right? It doesn't. You're all together. You're forming this cohesive team. It can't be, well, I don't do this because of this. We're all united, right? It really is one of the few sectors of society that actually gets along, because my life is in your hand, is in mine, right? So that is a super important point. I think it's okay for them to show different faces in the military, specifically in that commercial. I don't think that's so off the mark. And it does have to be spoken. Look, Gen Z, again, like I said, is more than other generations maybe are okay with or want. Like, we care about this issue, right? It matters to us. But even with us, it can't be the overemphasis thing. It can't be the overriding push that, we all have to have equal parity all of a sudden of equal numbers. Like that's not the goal, perfect representation. Like it shouldn't be hitting the number. It should have to be hitting the person. Things should be done to get all communities inclusive, but we want to draw on the entire tapestry of America. That's important, right? You can't have some communities supporting the defense and not. These are issues that we have to get encouraged, but it can't be the overarching thing. At the end of the day, when we show up at OCS, we're all equal. I'm candidate 1, you're candidate 2, and we're all going to get, through the shit together.
So, all right, now for this third one here, we're going to shift to a little bit more of a controversial topic that's got lots of people kind of up in angst in multiple different directions. And this one is the whole, what some are deridingly call it the woke culture or whatever. So the question I'm going to have as you watch this next one, is the military, and especially the Army in this particular case, are they going too far with trying to make everybody happy and focusing on this? Because what you're going to notice, I'm going to show you most of this video, probably about 2/3 of it is more on the background of the person, and only the small part of the end of it is actually on the service part. Watch this.
This is the story of a soldier who operates your nation's Patriot missile defense systems. It begins in California, with a little girl raised by 2 moms. Although I had a fairly typical childhood, took ballet, played violin, I also marched for equality. I like to think I've been defending freedom from an early age. When I was 6 years old, one of my moms had an accident that left her paralyzed. Doctors said she might never walk again. But she tapped into my family's pride to get back on her feet, eventually standing at the altar to marry my other mom. With such powerful role models, I finished high school at the top of my class, and then attended UC Davis, where I joined a sorority full of other strong women. But as graduation approached, I began feeling like I'd been handed so much in life, a sorority girl stereotype. Sure, I'd spent my life around inspiring women, but what had I really achieved on my own? One of my sorority sisters was studying abroad in Italy. Another was climbing Mount Everest. I needed my own adventures, my own challenge. And after meeting with an Army recruiter, I found it. A way to prove my inner strength and maybe shatter some stereotypes along the way. I'm U.S. Army Corporal Emma Malone Lord, and I answered my calling.
Okay, so I said 2/3. It was more like 3/4 was the background story of this person. And this is an Army recruiting video that they put out. And is this going to cause people in Gen Z to go, wow, that's cool, but they like homosexuality and the LGBTQ stuff. They like strong women. So sure, cool. I'm going to go join now because I can get this. Or is this it's certainly having a negative impact on a lot of the constituency I've seen. And just what's your honest view of that?
Yeah. And I think it's important to be able to have an honest view, right? And to be able to show what the polling showed, that was an extremely unsuccessful commercial, right? I'm not going to mince words, and that missed the mark. I have great respect for that service member, nothing against that, right? But that turned a lot more people away from the military. That commercial has been very much obviously discussed than it did turn on, unfortunately. And we have to be okay with saying,
hey, why is that? What, if you've looked at the polling, what is the reason why it was unsuccessful?
Yeah. And so again, we have to be okay with saying, hey, we missed the mark. Now, if you look at the reason why, if you look at the polling why, I think, yes, there is a fear in the military, right? For a long time, and fully look at the polling in the military, most of the military, the majority has been white conservative men have served in the military. That Southern white conservative men has been the largest constituent in the military. That's an important factor too. Right? We can't just neglect that the group doesn't exist. That group cannot be alienated in itself. As we try to bring in more groups, you can't alienate one group completely, right? And so I think what has happened is for people that are not into the woke agenda, right, or that are very turned off by seeing an institution go too woke, you're seeing what is I call the politicization of the military. The military has always been this apolitical workplace, like we said, right? You can be of any side of the aisle, but you're coming together for a larger cause to defend American freedom. If you see it slanting one side or the other, and you see that on Capitol Hill all the time, both parties, by the way, are guilty of this, where someone comes on in uniform and they just lambaste them, attack ruthlessly just to score that soundbite or that political point. That's bad, right? You cannot see it go too far in one direction. And the Overton window of society, political window, is always going to be shifting. There's always going to be changing, but you cannot see it go so far where all of a sudden now on a national television, the main recruiting commercial, right, is a person, frankly, that it seems is a very woke looking commercial, right? Like that's just not the commonality for the average person in the military, right? You can reach out to those people. That's great. Target them specifically with targeted marketing. But the average person joining the military is still an apolitical or wants to join an apolitical institution, not one that has been so shifted in one direction that like they're going to run and be inspired by. And that's where the polling, I think, shows and hits in a certain direction.
So let me ask you, both from your experience in the service so far, as well as among your, Gen Z fellows there, how do you, let me see how to phrase this. How do you say, okay, there are LGBTQ folks they love their country too. They want to serve. There are these white Southern people who, for whatever reasons they have personally, they don't agree with that. They're not supportive of it, so they don't like these kinds of commercials. But when they're all in the unit and when they're all in the service, they still have to work together, whether you're talking, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, it's, left, right, political, or this sort of sexual orientation, that sexual orientation. That's something that I never had to deal with when I was, especially as a young trooper, because it was just not an issue. No one really cared much about it one way or the other. It was just never talked about. And of course, now it's making commercials about it. So they're making sure it's an issue here. But how do you deal with that? And how does that affect recruiting anyway?
It's a great point, because the joke is like, and I learned this back in school, and now I've seen it in life. It's called the polarization of the elite, meaning of the leaders of both parties on both sides, whatever. They're way more polarized than the average common American, right? I think as polarized as the news stations will have us think, the average American just wants to wake up, have a good family, have a good job, do a good job, especially in the military. And so the re-encouraging thing that I see with my small unit, right, or small unit, level right here, is people from all different backgrounds, but it's not a problem to them, right? And we can have discussions. One thing I encourage, and I write this in the book, chapter 14 is the political chapter, is we should be allowed to have discussions. I should be allowed to have a political viewpoint, as should my lance corporal, as should my sergeant. We should be able to have these discussions in an open and honest way, not so afraid of offending or not so afraid of saying something, right? In fact, one of the ideas we had was, with NLP, natural language processing, and the frequency of video now, I should be allowed to have recorded discussions, genuine, like, what are my ideas to improve the force? What are my ideas on politics? Way to sample the force. And those be sent up to some larger aggregated, centralized server, and then NLP, natural language processing, parses all of them, right? The AI will go through and see, like, for the first time ever, you can get really good polling on all the small units in the armed forces, right? Whereas before you'd have to write with a letter and some generals sitting in the pen. And now it's like, theoretically, if you invested money or actually, created a system, you could hear all of our thoughts in a really unique way. And in 2 seconds, all of them could be coded, and you could start to see what all the small units were talking about or concerned about, right? And so that's a much more macro level program. But with the micro level discussions, I should be able to have these conversations. We should be able to have these political discussions and hear people's thoughts. And hey, if this Marine or this sailor or this soldier came and said this or this, like, we should be able to have that discussion. And again, not to be some macro, huge, crazy issue or someone's running, whatever. Let us sort this at the small unit level to bring together, to create those teams, the team of teams of this.
Yeah, because I think that's the bottom line, that creating the team, because the recruiting is supposed to be about bringing in, a quality force at the enlisted level, at the officer level, at the various levels of both of those categories, to form one combat effective team, because that is supposed to be the number one overriding reason for the existence of the military is to have effective combat force so that we can defend our country when called to do so. Now, in the last section here, I want to talk just real briefly on a completely separate topic, but I think is really important to recruiting, or at least I believe it is. So I'd like to see what your book has to say, and if you know anything about the polling in this particular area here. But first of all, I'm going to play something from just earlier today, where Secretary of Defense Austin was talking to some of the troops that are helping in the Ukraine mission there, and he told them this.
Thank you for doing what you do. And I hope you realize how important this is. I know when you're working hard each and every day and things are going not quite like you want them to go every day, you sometimes question whether or not what you're doing at that time is really making a difference. It is. You are enabling us to provide support to a country that's fighting for its existence. There's probably nothing more important than that. Without you doing what you do, we would not be able to do the kinds of things that we've done over the last 21 months to provide meaningful security assistance to Ukraine.
Okay, now I'm not going to ask you to comment on the Secretary of Defense because you're in active duty,
and
that's
I appreciate that. Exactly.
So I'm not going to ask you to do that. I'll make a comment, then I'm going to ask you just categorically for you to talk. And again, seriously, not about him, but this is a good vehicle in here. What he told those troops was, okay, you may think that you're not doing anything that's going to matter, but it really is. It really is making a difference in all this. But as we talk about on this show routinely, and have been, really ever since we were formed, is that the war is not going well. It is not succeeding. The Ukraine side is not making any difference. We had a show on just a couple of days ago that showed how if you looked at the battle lines 1 year ago and exactly 1 year later, there's virtually no change. So you can graphically see it's not making better. Now, the troops can see that. They know that what they're doing, they've been deployed there, they're helping out with this or that, but they see it's not making any difference in anything. And so when you have someone of a high rank that come and tells you, hey, you may not think it is, but it really is, you see that there's going to be a temptation to kind of roll the eyes and go, yeah, it really isn't. But I guess if you're telling me that, that's fine. What is for the Gen Z folks when they hear people saying things that don't seem to line up with what they can see and observe with their own eyes? What kind of an impact does that make?
So it's a good point about sort of look, the DoD is one of the largest organizations in the world, largest employer in America, right? Besides Amazon, actually. So technically second, but I know it's crazy, first time ever. But I think I learned in business school that relates to sort of what I was saying earlier. That's a good way to answer this. Is the people at the lowest level, at the closest point of the problem, know the best solutions that are out there. So this is one of the reasons I wrote the book, right? It's because I am close. I agree with that. Just recruited. I was just brought in. I know better about the recruiting cycle than someone that's making a decision all the way up there. They have a lot more data, but they don't know like the fine point details. Same thing with larger. One of the biggest problems we always have in the military, this is in all the training manuals, is the general has all the information. But if the general doesn't come out and see the frontline troops or see the battle positions, right? I listened to Secretary Mattis describe when he took a plane above the battlefield in Afghanistan, right? And actually was able to see various areas and valleys, right? To actually get that frontline perspective. If the general doesn't come out and see that, then and they don't stay connected to that frontline tactical troop, then we're in trouble, right? We need to keep that information flow, that feedback flow for both warfighting, but also information super, super tight. And so I think the way I'll answer, right, again, not speaking out of the chain of command, not whatever, is that, again, you need to be transparent with the frontline troop in every single situation, right? And you need to be able to glean key insights from them. So if the frontline troop is waving his hand and saying, hey, this is an issue or whatever, there needs to be a streamlined process to pass that back up. So just to bring it to recruiting, but also just morale in general, like if the frontline troops are saying, barracks are bad, we are having a massive issue, we need these fixed, you could say, okay, that they're whining and they're being soft, maybe that's true, or these are a massive issue and they're
they really are bad, yeah.
They're raising the alarm, like we should be doing something about this. But I don't think there's because it's such a big bureaucracy, and that's not to anyone's fault, that's the nature of what it's become so big, that there needs to be a good streamlined process. That's why one of these ideas, like, it would be so nice if I could record a video, right? The barracks are bad. Look at this. I am a Lance Corporal, one of the lowest ranking enlisted, right? I send that up to this larger cloud system, right? This larger aggregated database, right? And it doesn't get responded to initially by a general. That's not the point. But if 1,000 of us were able to send up the same video, look at the barracks, maybe issue, whatever, then you send all that up, then you're going to start to see, wow, 1,000 troops in one day sent this thing up. That's an instant feedback. We need to get a move on this, right?
Yeah.
Or
And now
1,000
you've got
troops.
video evidence. You don't have to take, he's just whining. You're like, oh, crap, that really is bad. Yeah. So you see it.
Exactly. You're able to aggregate data so much better. It has to be a good streamlined pass back, And look, I'm very supportive of my senior leaders. I do have full faith. I am active. I'm not just saying that, right? I also believe, you believe in the chain of command. I will never speak ill or out against the chain of command.
Yeah.
Obviously, while there's a privilege as a citizen you have that I don't. In any way, I believe, I don't believe people are actively trying to do things negatively to hurt the country or hurt the growth of the country. But I do think what often happens as we rise in rank, your view gets much more clouded. I've seen this in briefs that we've given, directly ourselves, right? The view that I can give a captain is much more direct than the view I would give a 2-star general, right? The captain's going to hear, hey, sir, this is wrong. You need to fix this. Versus the general, it's going to be like, here's the PowerPoint brief, and everything is fine and dandy, and you get 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah. I've seen a lot of those.
Exactly. As much as we can.
Yeah. So okay, then let me ask you this one last before we leave here, because I think this might be one of the bigger issues, and my personal feel is that this is one of the major reasons why the numbers for recruiting are significantly low across the board, especially in the Army. Earlier today, I was on News Nation and was talking about a specific situation with the U.S. troops. There's a small number of U.S. troops that are on the ground in Syria and in Iraq. They have been there for many years. And as I've argued relentlessly on both television and in written products, they're not serving any valid purpose for the United States. They're just basically there. And so now then we have this risk because of the war going on in Israel and Hamas, that a lot of these radical Islamic groups are targeting the U.S. troops, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, and then several others, Iran-based in Syria. And our troops have been attacked 61 times since the 17th of October. Many of them have been wounded. Thank God so far none have been killed. But I was asked today, what do I say about the senior U.S. leaders who claim that, in fact, they're serving a vital need to the United States? But I argued this.
But the bigger issue, and I'll just tell you to address your question there, it is not true that our troops are sitting there providing some sort of use for America, that they're doing a counter ISIS mission that's preventing the rise of those. You have to look on the ground. You're talking about 1,000 people in the entire country of Syria and 2,000 in Iraq, which are basically sitting in their headquarters and in small areas. They're not going out and doing counterinsurgency missions. It has nothing to do with ISIS. We may take a person out here and there, but it's inconsequential to the ocean of people that are out there, and it's not necessary for our safety. So it's not true that they're doing that, but they are putting us at risk. And I again say, I just cannot emphasize enough, we don't need to see any of our troops killed for no purpose.
So when people are thinking about signing up for a military, we talked about this at the front of the show, is that they have this express understanding that one day they may be put into combat situations to defend our country, and they may have to put their lives at risk. When they see like this 20-year fiasco that we had in Afghanistan, where we sent hundreds of thousands of troops there and lost 30,000 and wounded and another 4,000 or 5,000 killed during that time. And they see the same thing in Iraq on somewhat smaller numbers altogether. But they see this long pattern where they just keep going out there for nothing. Everybody knows about the weapons of mass destruction that was never there. So that whole war was based on something fraudulent. The issue after 9/11, okay, there was a valid reason to go after the people that attacked us, but then we stayed for 2 decades and then we left under complete chaos. And so people are going, why would I want to join the military and be a part of something like this? And now then with these two situations, you literally have American troops just sitting out in the middle of the desert doing almost nothing, wondering if they're going to get killed, but they're not defending anything for the country. Is that having an impact on people wanting to sign up? Forget about all these, benefits and education benefits and other things they can learn when they think, am I going to go and be also sent out there in the middle of nowhere, just wondering if I'm going to be killed for no reason? What kind of an impact do you think that has?
So I think the larger mission, again, will not comment on your troop deployment and specific missions, obviously, but I think from a macro perspective, right, I think two things hold true. People join the military because they actually want to defend the country and do things. So they do want to take active roles. They don't want to sit in garrison. They want to deploy. They want to go places. They want to have a part to say they impacted history, they impacted the country. And the second part of that, I think this goes into the comment, is they want to feel like they made an impact and a difference. They didn't just sit somewhere because they were told and eat chow and lift weights and not actually have an active mission and active impact, right? And so I think one of the larger issues in a peacetime military, right, which we definitely we are now, right? We're shifting majority to a peacetime military. Which look, we're not here to say when the country goes to war or not. Like we obviously want peace more than we want war. But what are the missions? Are the missions truly building future defenses? Are they truly supporting the safety and security of the United States and our allies, or are they, is it hard to make that gap? And if it is hard to make that gap for whatever, specific, again, won't comment specifically on those bases, but whatever those troops are doing, whatever, it needs to be explicitly explained, hey, this is the impact you're making because of X, Y, and Z, even if we can't see the full picture.
Yeah. And so let me ask you a specific question, specifically on recruiting. So there is really a next level of what I just described there. There's several other former military members and members of Congress who are saying if any of those troops are killed, then we need to go after Iran and we need to strike directly in Iran. And of course, that could cause even more American casualties because it could draw us into a war. So along with like that question that was just posed on the screen there, when someone's thinking about being recruited, do they think, I don't want to go to war with Iran. We don't need to go to war with Iran. That's not defending the country. That's just you talking, Mr. Congressman, about sending our troops over there. That means me, if I sign up to go fight some war against somebody that we don't even care about, that's not even doing anything to America directly. Is that affecting the recruiting to people saying, I don't want to join the army if I'm going to go and get deployed and maybe fight a war with Iran?
So it's actually an interesting point because I think you're going to have a half and half answer here. And it won't satisfy one or the other. And the reason is, I do think there's a large cadre and contingent that wants to actually deploy and actively do something. So there is.
I've seen it. I agree. That's entirely true.
So there's going to be some group that actually wants to go. There's going to be other people that are deterred that are like, hey, maybe I was thinking about taking that supply job in McDonald's military, but if there's a war on the horizon, heck no, I don't want to do that, right? And that's where you run a tricky issue. It's actually I've never been asked the question. It's an interesting point. I don't necessarily have the perfect answer to, except that you have to take two assumptions when someone joins. You have to take the assumption that if someone's willing to join and serve, yes, they are willing to go fight if asked for, right? And the larger spectrum and sphere in the country, right? We don't want to be a belligerent, bellicose country constantly running around fighting, right? It's not good for the nation. It's not good for our economy in any way. And Gen Z will say, hey, what is this? This is crazy. We want to have purpose, right? Like, I think, again, just look at the two recent wars. The Afghanistan pullout had a negative effect on recruiting. Data shows that. And a lot of young Gen Zers are saying, what do we do all this for? What was the purpose? And you look at the 91 Gulf War, and you could probably say that probably had a boost on recruiting. It was like, wow, America was kicking butt. We came in, had a very tight, defined task. So the way it sort of makes sense is, hey, the military has to win. The more the military wins, the more the country wins, the better recruiting is going to be, right? If desire for the country, desire for the military goes down, trust in the military goes down, which we're having some troubles with, then you're going to have a lack of recruiting, right? So we want clear, defined policy goals that we can all shoot for and attain, not get whipsawed around left and right. Like, if we have clear, defined policy goals, you're going to have desired, strong recruiting and desire to be on the quote winning team, right? That's an important factor. So morale, it's really a morale question. Morale and guidance has to be high. We want to know that our leaders are competent, working in the right direction, and getting us involved when we need to be involved, but not overly involved. I think is the short answer.
Right. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's such a good point that there really is two views, but especially when you're talking about recruiting, I think there's probably more in the category that don't want to go fight an unnecessary war than those who are looking, for that just honestly do want to get in there. And frankly, we need both of the troops, because sometimes if you have to go fight, you want guys who actually do want to fight. That's part of the hardcore truth about having a military that has to go fight sometimes for your defense. But we will leave it right there for now. Matt, thank you so much for coming over here. Here's again your book to anybody who wants more details. We Don't Want You, Uncle Sam, and recommend that because it's got lots of good information you're just not going to get anywhere else. That's a very unique book that you have there, and we're very grateful that you got up so early in the morning to be able to be on our show today. We're very grateful and wish you nothing but the best of success, man.
No, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate you having me on. I think it's a super important show, and I had a great discussion with you. Thank you for everything you've done for the country. And yeah, my parting message is these conversations are important, specifically around recruiting. That's obviously what I'm focused on. But the more people that have insight, that have these conversations, the book is written to be the dinner table conversation. Even if you're not in the military or not any connection, what would make it more interesting? What would make it more interesting so that every community is involved? Because we all gain the benefit of public defense. Every community in the U.S., doesn't matter where you are, is gaining the benefit of living in this free nation. We all, as a community, every community owes something to it. Even if they're not going to send, a member of their community to serve, they owe something to think about it. What can make it more appealing? How can they better it? And that's sort of my parting message. So thank you so much.
Perfect. You bet. Very well said. Thanks. And we thank you for watching. We're going to continue to be unintimidated and uncompromised on bringing you the truth. The things that you need to know that you see underneath the headlines here, we're giving you the details that you need to understand your world around you. Thanks. Be sure to like and subscribe and pass this on to your friends who also want to have the unvarnished truth, because we're going to keep giving it to you. We'll see you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.